approve the 2011 tax levy. Mike, did you want
Excuse me. Yes, good evening, President Millar, members of the board, Superintendent Thompson. Just lost my place. At the November board meeting, I did present a proposed tax levy to the board at that time. And just to recap, the CPI, or the rate of inflation for the 2010 calendar year, which affects the 2010 levy, which the board will be voting on tonight, is 1.5%. So the way that formula works is the 2010 tax extension times 1.5% increase, and there's a, we're going to have an overhead for tonight's meeting, but we've had some technical difficulties. Tax extension for last year is $107.3 million approximately. 1.5% increase would yield a tax extension for 2011, $108.9 million. We have recommended a 3%, what we refer to as a balloon levy in school finance language. Allows the district to capture new growth. We estimated about 0.5% new growth for the 2011 levy. 2011 levy, which really is an estimate. We don't have a firm number from Cook County or any of the taxing authorities. At a 3% levy increase, that would yield a tax extension next year of $110.5 million. So the difference from 1.5 is 108.9 million to 110.5 at 3%. The compromise number at 2%, a balloon levy at 2%, would yield an estimated tax extension next year of 109.4 million, almost 109.5 million. So again, going from 107.3 million in 2010, at 1.5, it's 108.9 million, 109.445 million at 2%, and 110.5 million at 3%. And again, the estimate is what is the amount of the new growth, and how much, if any of that, is the district interested in capturing, which then leads to the discussion how much of a tax levy for the board to approve tonight. And I guess that's about really a review of the numbers. Obviously, the rates are different. Estimated rates are different depending on what that ultimate number actually comes out to. I've put some estimated rates in the board packet as well, as far as what that levy rate would be. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Mike, what is your recommendation to the board?
Well, my recommendation, and we did discuss this in cabinet, in order for the district to be able to realize the most amount of revenue that the district's entitled to, would be to have a levy of 3%. That allows the district to realize 1.5% growth in the levy, plus any additional, the 1.5% CPI increase, I should say, not growth, plus any growth on top of that.
Given the fact that we do empathize with the economy and people struggling with their homes and their finances, given the fact that you've asked us to come back with $10 million in cuts as a potential to curb our deficit, we really would recommend going for the 3% so that we wouldn't have to cut more. We will be frugal, we'll be fiscally responsible, we'll try to find every way we can cut that we possibly can, but it would be our recommendation that the board cut for 3%.
If I understand correctly, the current forecast for next year has about 0.5% new growth assumption.
Yeah, so the levy I presented last month had growth of 21 million, which was about 0.5%. And again, and that was higher, or about the highest of the prior 3 tax levy years that we looked at. We know that the Village of Palatine is looking at about a 1% increase. So that's half of what the Village of Palatine is looking at as far as new growth. We do encompass other municipal or other taxing authorities, i.e. parts of Barrington and Rolling Meadows, etc., that the Village of Palatine does not encompass, obviously. So that would affect our ultimate growth as well. But to answer your question, we did estimate about 0.5%.
And as far as you know, that's the best estimate that we can come up with right now. It could be anywhere from 0.2% to 1%, or
I'd say it's a good guesstimate at this point. It's a good guesstimate at this point.
And that represents about 500,000 of revenue.
That was estimating about $500,000 of additional revenue to the district based on the new growth only. Correct. Yes.
as I've mentioned before, I would like to see us stay at the 1.5 if we could, as opposed to going for that new growth, because, you know, the taxpayers are struggling quite a bit, and the growth or the increase in real estate taxes for the residential owner is going to be typically much more than the 1.5% because of the shift of the commercial properties and some of the Cook County changes. You know, they're going to get hit pretty hard. Additionally, with the new construction, it's a very complicated issue. We've talked about it at length. I think the taxpayers have gotten penalized in a lot of ways because of new construction. By grabbing that extra growth, we end up raising the limit or the amount of taxes that we're collecting. And when a commercial property is new, it's worth usually more money than a few years later. Those properties may not be worth the same amount, so when they get reduced, the other taxpayers have to make up that additional amount. So we end up paying basically a penalty in some cases for that new growth. And, you know, tax bills, I know mine has gone up much more than the CPI, for sure. And again, looking at the income that the district has received, I mean, I think your numbers on the taxes are correct. We've gotten in, I think, about 3.2 or 3.4%, I can't remember the exact number, for the last 10 years on average. And with the state, it's been about 7 points, over 7%, 7.3. So we've gotten a lot of revenue. If you add the extra $5 million we got when the Cook County did the 55% early payment, we got another $8 million in the ARRA, which again is taxpayer money. The taxpayers also then got a 66% increase in our income tax, which a lot of that went for education-related expenses, for pensions and for even transportation, I'm sure, things like that. So we've gotten a lot of revenue in, much above CPI, and we still have the deficit situation. I just think at this time, to be fair to taxpayers, we should cap it at the 1.5. And again, that's my position on it. I understand that some people will disagree with that, but I don't think there's any time in our history where we would have done no tax increase. I don't think it changes depending on what's happening today. Looking forward, again, with the shortfalls, and again, those are because of things that we've done as, you know, not individuals per se, but the board has done for the last 10 years to get us into that position with contracts and things that didn't match the income, the CPI. We've been spending considerably more than CPI. So
I also agree with the 1.5, mainly, you know, when someone's making $200,000 a year, the 3% may not impact them much, but if people are living on unemployment benefits, which is maximum of $1,300 a month, 3% is a lot. They can't even make a payment for their mortgage. So, you know, we're trying to, you know, squeeze out more and more out of our community, and, you know, very soon, the 12,000 students that we have, we may not have these many residents in this community to be able to pay their taxes. So we're still going to go back and ask, you know, it's keep on asking back from the community as we lose people, and more empty houses are going to be left behind. So, you know, I also agree with the 1.5.
Mike, don't we lose this 0.5% over the accumulated 5 years? So we continue to lose it on the new growth?
Well, you wouldn't be able to realize it ever, so whatever the district, ultimately the answer is yes. So if you don't collect it in year one, you can only not collect it in year one, you don't collect it for any other future year. There's no way to go back and capture it in any future years.
It's the same thing like a contract. If you give something in a contract, it's forever, basically.
It's forever, that's correct.
And it compounds. It's the same issue. Again, if we had done things at CPI at the income levels, or even a little above CPI, we'd be rolling in cash. You know, again, it's not because the taxpayers haven't paid enough money. That's for sure.
I agree with what you said, but as I mentioned last time, for me, the bottom line is that we have a $9.6 million deficit forecast for next year. And if we don't capture the new growth, we're going to have a $10.1 million deficit next year, compounding. And you know, I think we got enough of a challenge just to get a $9.6 million solution without exacerbating it by going to a $10.1 million problem. So I do understand what you're saying, but at this point, we're just got a huge problem with the deficit that we need to solve. And I think we need to do that first
extra 1.5% out of our community's growth. You know, we as historical board, current board, however we want to put it, we've made the decision to give more than what was necessary at the time, which has brought us into $9.6 million deficit. I think what we need to focus on is try to not, we need to learn to live within our means first. We can't squeeze out of, you know, we can't keep on adding more and take out more from the people. You know, they're already being squeezed out enough. You know, so we need to look at it from that perspective. I understand it's something, once we don't take it, we lose it, but, you know.
We need to come up with different ways to be able to make up this deficit.
Yeah, we need to be more creative.
And the problem is that so far, nobody has shared a vision for how we're going to achieve a $9.6 million reduction in spending. So until we have some vision, I certainly can't say that we won't capture growth to which the district is entitled.
But I think we also need
We
to
have
look
not
at it
seen
from,
you right now.
yeah, sorry. We also have to look at it from a common man's perspective as well. You know, somebody who's living on unemployment benefits, who can't afford to, you know, put dinner for their kids possibly. We need to think from that perspective, put ourselves in those shoes. And how would that 1.5 additional increase impact somebody like that?
I understand that, but you know, we've got a $9.6 million problem. Are we going to increase class sizes? Are we going to cut salaries? Are we going to cut programs? Are we going to increase taxes later? And I think that trying to hold back on the revenue right now, it just exacerbates the problem that we have down there.
But I think all we're saying is we've taken the same revenue that we did the previous years, just with that 1.5% increase with the CPI. I strongly recommend staying with that 1.5, not to squeeze out anymore. You know, the $2 million does impact quite a few families that live in the district.
So you're accepting that next year's deficit would be a $10.1 million
We said that
problem?
we have to cut down this deficit.
$10.1 million instead of 9.6.
Yeah, we said $10 million deficit.
Well, but it grows if you
Totally understand.
if you levy at 1.5, the deficit for next year grows.
We need to be hard and figure out how we are going to come out. We need to see a plan on what we are going to do to reduce that deficit. And we just, I mean, it just seems that we continue to keep going down this path. We're going to ask for more, we're going to ask for more, we're going to ask for more. And you know what? It just continuously still grows. So we need to really be hard-nosed about this and really figure out what are we going to do. We need some ideas. You're right, we haven't seen a plan yet. We need a plan.
This is an act of just cutting the credit cards, not using it anymore to add more debt, more to our credit card debt. This is one of those, you know, starting to make those hard decisions, and starting to live within our means. This is, or freezing a credit card, whatever analogy you want to give, this is one of those analogies here.
If we can't do it locally, that's pretty lost. The, I think 211 did a 1.8 levy.
The 1.8, Scott, or 1.5, 1.87, right around there.
The Park District, I think, did a 0. I'm not sure what some of the other municipalities, I know Rolling Meadows is going high, they've gotten into some challenges. But again, I just feel if we can't do it, then there's never going to be a time. I mean, you know, we say, well, now's not a good time. Okay, when in history was there ever a time? Because government kind of runs away with no matter what comes in, it seems that you're always spending more. We knew some of these problems, you know, going back to the first day I was on the board. It didn't stop them from, you know, giving away things that they didn't have. So
Who were they? It didn't stop the board that you were on, I believe, correct?
any of the
Those are the
boards that I've been
decisions.
on,
Correct.
right.
Correct. So it's a board decision, it's not
It's a
individual
board
decisions. And this has been going on. Hindsight, I think we need to rely on that, and we certainly can learn from that, but we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan for cutting the deficit yet. We have a lot of complaints, we have a lot of decisions to make in the future, but we've not come up with a plan, and that's been for years.
I mean, one thing I would support is for the future, taking the new growth out of the forecast. For me, step one is fixing the spending issue. And I think we could put in the forecast for future years, take out the new growth. I think that's a fair thing to do as a target, but I think at this point it's too early to assume that we're going to come up with 9.6 million temporary.
And I do agree with that, Steve.
it's so much as timing. This has to go before the next step in terms of what the cuts are. We don't
Yeah,
have.
We'll never
the
have
timing.
the unfortunate thing is, you know, it's having like a $50,000 credit card and keeping on asking for the the increase on the credit card limit and continuing to spend on it. We need to say, okay, we're gonna lower our credit card limit. We're gonna bring it down to $10,000 and now figure out how we're gonna live within our means. That's what we need to do. We cannot keep on, you know, penalizing the members who live in this community, who made decisions to come to this community for schools, for good education. But, you know, we're penalizing them for living in this community by keeping on asking for more and more and more and more. I mean, that's the baseline.
We need to start somewhere, basically, is what it is. We need to start.
And it doesn't matter what year, I mean, you can.
There's no good
You can
time.
project out, exactly. If it's 500,000 now, let's say, or it's 300,000 now, next year, new growth, it might pick up, we have some buildings going up. You're not gonna do it next year because you have new buildings going up, but no matter when you start, it's gonna be the same compounding, so I don't see what the difference is.
I think.
In the long term, it's so minor. If you're thinking a year or 2 years, it's not gonna make a difference.
Well, if we sequence it, we fix the deficit issue, and I think at this point, certainly the board could direct the administration to think about future forecasts, so that we do have, some direction now to not do it in the future. But at this point, I think it's just premature to not capture the new growth.
Just a little cynical, I just don't see that ever happening. If you can't do it now, you're not gonna do it 5 years from now. They hadn't done it for the last 20, even in the boom times, so I don't see that.
Well, it would appear to me that we have two sides, I mean, we have two opinions to the issue.
Right,
Time
that's
to-
what we're gonna vote on later.
We'll take a vote.
Thanks, Mike.